Connect with the people we love, she said, smiling into the camera as she stirred melted cheese in a designer kitchen, wearing a ball gown while her crew stood exhausted in fleeces after a 15-hour day. But 5,000 miles away, her own father lay fighting for his life in intensive care, a blood clot threatening to take him at any moment. The doctors said it was touch and go, and yet the phone never rang. The daughter who built an empire preaching compassion, grace, and connection couldn't find time to dial the man who raised her. For decades, Thomas Markle Sr. worked in the shadows of Hollywood, lighting the sets of beloved shows, earning enough to give his daughter every advantage, every opportunity. He walked her down countless metaphorical aisles before anyone knew her name. But when she needed him for the real walk, the one the whole world would watch on May 19th, 2018, he was erased from the narrative, written out of the story like a problematic character in a script revision. What did Meghan Markle really want from the father who gave her everything? What drives a woman to preach about family while her own crumbles in the most public way imaginable? Join us as we uncover the heartbreaking truth behind one of the royal family's most painful estrangements, a story of ambition, betrayal, and a father's undying love for a daughter who seemingly wants nothing to do with him. It all began quietly, the way these revelations often do. On December 5, 2024, reports emerged from sources close to the Markle family that Thomas Markle Sr., 79 years old, had been rushed to the hospital with a massive stroke. Emergency surgery followed, doctors working desperately to remove a blood clot that threatened his life. Within hours, the news spread across media outlets, but one call notably never came. The woman who once depended on this man for everything, who texted him constantly during her early days with Prince Harry, remained silent. Sources confirmed that Thomas lay in intensive care at a hospital in Southern California, the same state where his daughter lives in an £11 million mansion in Montecito, just hours away by car. Yet the distance might as well have been an ocean. This wasn't a story that broke with fanfare. It surfaced through Thomas's other daughter, Samantha Markle, who quietly updated concerned friends and followers. No official statement came from the Sussex camp, no acknowledgement, no well wishes. The silence was deafening. Royal commentator Lady Colin Campbell noted in a carefully worded statement on December 6th, "One would hope that in moments of genuine medical crisis, family differences might be set aside. The question isn't whether Meghan will reach out, it's whether she already has and we simply don't know, or whether her silence speaks volumes about where her priorities truly lie." The timing made it particularly painful. This crisis emerged just as Meghan's Netflix special, With Love, Meghan, released to scathing reviews. A show filmed nearly a year earlier where she pontificated about connection, tradition, and the importance of creating family memories. Critics were swift to point out the jarring contrast between her televised persona and the reality of her fractured family relationships. But to understand how a father and daughter could reach this devastating impasse, we need to go back to the beginning, to a quieter time in Rachel Meghan Markle's life before the Duchess title, before the palace, before the world knew her name. Thomas Wayne Markle Sr. was born in July 1945 in the working-class neighborhoods of Pennsylvania. Growing up in an America still celebrating victory in World War II, he developed a passion for television and film early, understanding that the magic audiences saw on screen required countless hours of unglamorous work behind the scenes. By his early 20s, he'd made his way to Hollywood, not as an actor or director, but as a lighting director, one of the most crucial yet least celebrated roles in television production. For over 30 years, Thomas Markle Sr. lit some of America's most beloved shows. He wasn't the star, but he made the stars look good. Married with Children, General Hospital, Facts of Life, his fingerprints were on the visual aesthetics of shows that defined American television in the 80s and 90s. The work was demanding, the hours brutal, but the pay was solid, and Thomas had a reason to work those long days, his daughter, Rachel Meghan. Born on August 4, 1981 in Los Angeles, Meghan entered a world her father helped create. Thomas's first marriage had already ended, producing Samantha and Thomas Jr., but when Meghan came along with his second wife, Doria Ragland, colleagues said he seemed to find new purpose. Thomas Wayne Markle wasn't just devoted to his youngest daughter, He was fiercely protective of her dreams. When other children were struggling with homework at the kitchen table, young Meghan was visiting television sets, watching her father work, absorbing the magic of the industry. Thomas made sure she attended the best private schools, something that strained his finances but never his resolve. He would work double shifts, recalled a former colleague who requested anonymity. Tom would take any job, any hours, if it meant Meghan could stay at that school, have those opportunities. He wanted her to have doors open that had been closed to him. This devotion went beyond financial support. Thomas attended every school play, every parent-teacher conference. When Meghan showed an interest in acting, he didn't dismiss it as a childish fantasy. Instead, he used his industry connections to help her understand the business, to get small roles, to learn the craft properly. The anecdotes from this era paint a picture of an unshakable bond. Thomas's brother, Frederick Markle, recalled a family gathering in the mid-90s when Meghan, then a teenager, performed a scene from a school play. Tom was recording it on this massive video camera, so proud he had tears in his eyes. When she finished, he stood up and applauded like she'd just won an Oscar. That was Tom with Meghan. Always. She was his princess long before she became a duchess. Another story, shared by a family friend, involved Thomas taking teenage Meghan on a father-daughter trip to Mexico. They stayed in a modest hotel, nothing fancy, but Thomas made sure they explored the culture, tried local foods, practiced their Spanish. He told me later that week was one of the best of his life, the friend shared. Just him and his girl, talking about everything and nothing, making memories. He said Meghan told him she wanted to make a difference in the world, and he believed her completely. He always believed in her. Throughout the 90s and into the early 2000s, Thomas continued working steadily, even as the industry evolved and younger technicians replaced the old guard. He won a Daytime Emmy Award for his work, a recognition that meant everything to him, not because of the trophy itself, but because Meghan had been there that night, beaming with pride. By the time Meghan graduated from Northwestern University in 2003, Thomas had given her everything he possibly could: education, opportunity, connections, unwavering support. She was 22, beautiful, talented, and ready to conquer Hollywood. Thomas stepped back, content to watch from the wings as he'd done all those years on set, letting the star shine. Their relationship during these years was warm and constant. Meghan frequently called her father, updating him on auditions, boyfriends, and career struggles. When she landed the role on Suits in 2011, Thomas was one of the first people she told. The show filmed in Toronto, far from Los Angeles. But they stayed connected. Text messages, phone calls, the occasional visit when Meghan came home. Thomas had entered semi-retirement by then, his savings carefully managed, living a quiet life in Rosarito, Mexico, where the cost of living allowed him to stretch his pension further. But was Thomas Markle Sr. really prepared for what came next? Could any father truly anticipate the seismic shift that would occur when his daughter caught the eye of Prince Harry of Wales? Let's take a closer look at the relationship that changed everything and set this devastating estrangement in motion. The timeline is crucial to understanding what happened. Meghan and Harry's relationship became public in October 2016 when the news broke that the eligible royal bachelor was dating an American actress. Initially, Thomas was thrilled. Sources close to the family say Meghan called him with the news before it went public, explaining that she'd met someone special, someone who made her happy. Thomas's reaction was reportedly simple and heartfelt. "If he makes you happy, that's all that matters to me." But happiness quickly gave way to chaos. The British tabloids descended on Meghan's life with unprecedented ferocity, digging into her past, her family, her father. Photographers camped outside Thomas's modest home in Mexico, offering him money for interviews, photos, anything to feed the insatiable public appetite for details about this woman who'd captured a prince's heart. Thomas Markle Sr. found himself thrust into a spotlight he'd spent his entire career avoiding. He was a behind-the-scenes guy, remember? Someone who made others look good but never sought attention himself. Now, at 71 years old, retired and living quietly, he was being photographed buying toilet paper, walking his dog, existing. The pressure was immense, and he made mistakes that would cost him everything. In the months leading up to the royal wedding scheduled for May 19, 2018, Thomas cooperated with a photographer to stage supposedly candid photos. Images showing him reading about Britain, looking at photos of Meghan and Harry, preparing for his role as father of the bride. The photos were sold to tabloids for tens of thousands of pounds. When the staging was revealed just days before the wedding, the scandal exploded. Palace officials were furious. Meghan was reportedly devastated. The narrative shifted from proud father to money-hungry opportunist in the span of a news cycle. Thomas released a statement apologizing, explaining he'd meant no harm, that he'd been trying to rehabilitate his image after weeks of unflattering paparazzi shots. "I apologize to Meghan, Harry, and the royal family for any embarrassment I may have caused," he said in a statement released on May 14, 2018. "I was trying to show myself in a positive light. I see now how wrong that was. But the damage was done." Then came the health crisis that would serve as the first fissure in this father-daughter relationship. On May 15, 2018, just 4 days before the wedding, Thomas Markle Sr. suffered a heart attack. The timing seemed almost too perfectly tragic. He was hospitalized in Mexico, underwent surgery, and was told by doctors that traveling to England for the wedding would be medically inadvisable, potentially life-threatening. The back and forth over those crucial days became public spectacle. Thomas released statements saying he wouldn't attend, then that he would, then that he couldn't. Text messages between him and Meghan reportedly became tense, with Meghan urging him to listen to medical advice while also expressing hurt over the staged photos. Their final exchange, according to sources, ended with Thomas telling Meghan he couldn't make the journey due to his heart condition, and Meghan responding that she understood but was heartbroken. On May 19, 2018, the world watched as Meghan Markle walked down the aisle at St. George's Chapel in Windsor Castle, a vision in a Claire Keller gown, her face radiant with joy and emotion. Prince Charles stepped in to walk her partway down the aisle, a gesture widely praised as gracious and kind. But missing from the ceremony was the man who'd walked her through life for 36 years, the father who'd given up double shifts and saved every penny to make sure she could chase her dreams. Thomas watched from his living room in Mexico, still recovering from surgery, as the daughter he adored became the Duchess of Sussex without him by her side. "I watched the wedding on TV, and I was crying," Thomas told Good Morning Britain in his first interview after the wedding. "Not because I wasn't there, but because she looked so beautiful and happy. That's all I ever wanted for her, to be happy. But it broke my heart that I couldn't be there, that my mistake cost me that moment." The interview, conducted by British journalist Piers Morgan's colleague on June 18, 2018, marked the beginning of what would become a pattern. Thomas speaking publicly about his estrangement from Meghan, expressing his hurt and confusion, while Meghan and Harry maintained a stony silence, refusing to engage publicly with family drama. Royal protocol typically dictates such silence, but to Thomas and much of the public, it felt cold, unforgiving. Throughout late 2018 and into 2019, Thomas gave several interviews, each one peeling back layers of the increasingly bitter estrangement. He revealed that he and Meghan had barely spoken since the wedding, that his calls went unanswered, his texts ignored. He claimed he'd been ghosted by his own daughter, cut off completely despite his repeated attempts to reconcile, to explain, to apologize again for the staged photos. "I've tried everything," he told the Daily Mail in an emotional interview published on July 29, 2018. "I've apologized 100 times for those photos, but I'm not allowed to apologize. I'm not allowed to talk to my daughter. Every time I call, it goes to voicemail. Every text I send goes unanswered. I don't know what else to do." These interviews generated massive public interest but also criticism. Many accused Thomas of worsening the situation by speaking to the media, of violating his daughter's privacy, of trying to profit from his connection to royalty. Others saw a desperate father using the only avenue available to him to reach a daughter who'd shut him out completely. Royal biographer Andrew Morton, who famously helped Princess Diana tell her story, offered perspective in an interview with Australian television on August 3, 2018. Thomas Markle is in an impossible position. He's been told that going to the media makes things worse, but the media is literally the only way he can communicate with his daughter. Palace protocol has created a wall between them, and he's trying to scale it the only way he knows how. Is it wise? Probably not. Is it understandable? Absolutely. The tension escalated further when Thomas began revealing personal details about his relationship with Meghan and Harry, including claims that he'd financially supported Meghan through college, helped her build her career, and been a devoted father who deserved better treatment than complete abandonment over a single mistake made under extraordinary pressure. The royal family's traditional approach to family scandals is simple. Never complain, never explain, keep calm, and carry on. But this philosophy, while effective for managing traditional royal controversies, seemed particularly cruel when applied to a father publicly begging for any contact with his daughter. The silence from Meghan and Harry spoke volumes, but it didn't speak clearly. Were they following palace protocol? Were they genuinely hurt beyond reconciliation? Had they tried privately to reach out, only to be rebuffed? The public had no way to know, and in that vacuum, narratives formed. Throughout 2019, as Meghan's pregnancy with Archie progressed, Thomas made repeated public pleas to be included in his grandchild's life. "I want to be a grandfather," he told the Sun newspaper in an interview published on February 11, 2019. "I want Meghan to know I love her, that I'm proud of her, that I made a mistake but I'm still her father. This baby deserves to know his grandfather, and I deserve to know my grandson." When Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor was born on May 6, 2019, Thomas learned about his grandson's arrival the same way millions of others did, through media reports. No phone call, no text, no private notification. Just the official announcement and the carefully staged photo call showing Harry and Meghan with their newborn. Thomas released a statement through his representative. "I'm delighted and overjoyed to hear that my new grandson has arrived. Congratulations to Meghan, Harry, and God bless the baby." Even as Thomas's health deteriorated, undergoing further heart procedures and dealing with complications from his initial heart attack, the estrangement continued. In 2020, when Harry and Meghan made their shocking announcement that they were stepping back from royal duties and relocating to North America, eventually settling in California, many speculated that proximity might lead to reconciliation. After all, Thomas was in Mexico, just across the border from California. Surely now, with less pressure from the palace and the freedom to manage their own family relationships, Meghan might reach out. She didn't. Instead, the couple gave a bombshell interview to Oprah Winfrey, broadcast on March 7, 2021, that would send shockwaves through the royal family and beyond. In that interview, Meghan briefly addressed her father, her words carefully chosen, her tone controlled. "I grieve a lot. I mean, I've lost my father. I lost a baby. I nearly lost my name. There's the loss of identity, but I'm still standing." The phrasing was telling. Not, "I'm estranged from my father," or "my father and I aren't speaking," but "I've lost my father," as though he had died, as though she was in mourning for someone who no longer existed. To Thomas, watching from Mexico, the words must have felt like a knife. He was still alive, still desperate for contact, still hoping for reconciliation, but his daughter was publicly grieving him as though he were already gone. The response was swift and decisive, both from Thomas and from public opinion. Thomas gave a counter-interview, this time to Good Morning Britain, broadcast on March 23, 2021, where he defended himself and pushed back against Meghan's characterization of events. "I did not have that interview with Oprah," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. "I've been vilified by my daughter. She's lying. She's lying about racism in the royal family. She's lying about me, and it needs to stop." The accusation was harsh, the emotion raw. Whether one agreed with Thomas's assessment or not, there was no denying the genuine pain in his voice, the desperation of a father who felt he'd been written out of history, his contributions erased, his mistakes magnified beyond proportion. Royal commentator Lady Colin Campbell, never one to mince words, offered her assessment during a YouTube broadcast on March 25, 2021. "What we're witnessing is tragic on every level. Thomas Markle made mistakes under extraordinary pressure, mistakes he's apologized for repeatedly. But the punishment, Complete excommunication from his daughter's life, from his grandson's life, seems wildly disproportionate to the crime. Meanwhile, Meghan preaches compassion and healing and unity while maintaining this absolute wall of silence with her own father. The hypocrisy is staggering. Throughout 2021 and 2022, Thomas continued speaking out, and each interview generated headlines, criticism, and sympathy in seemingly equal measure. He revealed that he'd written letters to Meghan, to Harry, even to Archie, all unanswered. He'd sent birthday gifts and Christmas presents to his grandson with no acknowledgement that they'd been received. He'd reached out through mutual friends, through his other children, through anyone who might serve as an intermediary, all to no avail. The pattern was clear. Meghan had made her choice, and that choice was to erase her father from her new life completely. But Thomas's health was deteriorating. The heart problems that began in 2018 never fully resolved. He required multiple procedures, struggled with mobility, and faced the reality that time was running out for reconciliation. Friends reported that he'd become increasingly desperate, willing to do almost anything to hear his daughter's voice one more time, to meet his grandchildren, to be forgiven for mistakes made years ago under circumstances he'd never imagined facing. This brings us back to December 2024, to the intensive care unit in Southern California, to the elderly man fighting for his life after a massive stroke and emergency surgery to remove a blood clot. Thomas Markle Sr., now 79 years old, his hair white, his body frail, lying in a hospital bed while doctors monitored him around the clock, uncertain if he would survive the night, the week, the month, and just hours away by car, in her 11 million pound Montecito mansion, his daughter continued her day as though nothing had happened. Sources close to the situation, speaking on condition of anonymity, reported that Samantha Markle and Thomas Markle Jr. both tried reaching out to Meghan directly when their father's condition became critical. Phone calls went to voicemail. Emails received automated responses. A registered letter sent to the Montecito address was signed for by security but generated no reply. It was as though Thomas Markle Sr.'s medical crisis was simply another news story, something happening to someone else, not the man who'd raised her, supported her, loved her unconditionally for 36 years before a single mistake changed everything. The contrast between Meghan's public persona and her private actions became impossible to ignore. Her Netflix show, released just days before her father's hospitalization, featured her speaking earnestly about connection, about the importance of bringing people together during the holidays, about creating traditions and cherishing family. "The holidays are about finding time to connect with the people we love," she said in the show's opening moments, her voice warm and inviting. But the people she loved apparently didn't include the man lying in intensive care, fighting for his life. Critics were merciless. Social media erupted with commentary pointing out the jarring disconnect. She can spend an hour explaining how to fold Christmas crackers for strangers paid to be there, but she can't pick up the phone to check on her dying father? One viral tweet read, generating tens of thousands of shares. Another pointed out, Meghan says she lost her father in the Oprah interview, like he died. Now he's actually dying, and she still can't be bothered to call. What does that tell you about who she really is? Royal commentators, typically careful about weighing in on family matters, couldn't ignore the elephant in the room. On December 7, 2024, Richard Fitzwilliams, a respected royal expert, told Talk TV, "The silence from Montecito is deafening and deeply troubling. Whatever grievances Meghan has with her father, and they may be legitimate, this is a moment that transcends past hurt. This is potentially a deathbed situation. If she doesn't reach out now, if Thomas passes away without any reconciliation, that decision will define her legacy in ways no amount of charity work or Netflix shows can rehabilitate." The question everyone was asking, would Meghan make a frantic, face-saving call to her dying father? Would she finally break her years-long silence, not out of genuine care or reconciliation, but because the optics of letting him die without contact would be career suicide? Would it be too little, too late, a hollow gesture from a daughter who'd abandoned her father when he needed her most? Even as we await news of whether Meghan reached out privately, whether some late-night phone call happened that the public will never know about, the damage to her reputation seems irreversible. Her brand, carefully cultivated through years of strategic positioning as a humanitarian, an advocate for compassion and kindness, has been undermined by the stark reality of her treatment of her own father. You cannot preach about healing and unity while maintaining complete estrangement from the man who raised you. You cannot speak about the importance of family while denying your children the opportunity to know their grandfather. You cannot build a media empire on authenticity and connection while ghosting your elderly, ailing father for 6 years over mistakes made under impossible pressure. The legacy of this estrangement will outlive the players themselves. When historians write about Meghan Markle's time in and around the royal family, this will be a central chapter. The American actress who married a prince claimed she wanted to modernize the monarchy and bring more warmth and accessibility to the institution, but couldn't extend that same warmth to her own family. The woman who gave Oprah Winfrey a 2-hour interview detailing every grievance she had with the royal family but refused her father even 2 minutes on the phone to hear his side, to accept his apologies, to move forward. Thomas Markle Sr.'s legacy, by contrast, is more sympathetic in the eyes of many. A working-class man who succeeded in a competitive industry through talent and determination. A father who sacrificed personal comfort and financial security to give his daughter every advantage. A man who made a mistake under extraordinary circumstances, apologized repeatedly, and spent the final years of his life publicly begging for forgiveness and the chance to meet his grandchildren. Did he handle the situation perfectly? No. Should he have spoken to the media less? Tried private channels more? Perhaps. But his fundamental position, that a single mistake shouldn't result in permanent exile, that apologies should mean something, that family bonds should withstand even serious breaches, resonated with millions who watched this tragedy unfold. In his absence, even in his potential death, Thomas Markle Sr.'s voice lived on through the questions he raised about accountability, forgiveness, and the true meaning of family. His story became a cautionary tale about ambition unchecked by loyalty, about climbing social ladders while cutting the rungs below you, about what you're willing to sacrifice to protect an image. The broader implications for Harry and Meghan's brand cannot be overstated. They positioned themselves as victims of an uncaring institution, as rebels who chose love and authenticity over protocol and pretense. But the Thomas Markle situation flipped that narrative. If Meghan could cut off her own father so completely, so coldly, over relatively minor transgressions, what did that say about her character? If Harry stood by while his wife ghosted her dying father, refusing to encourage even basic human compassion, what did that reveal about his judgment? These questions lingered, unanswered and unanswerable, casting a shadow over every subsequent project, every interview, every carefully curated social media post. The couple's defenders argued that we don't know the full story, that there might be legitimate reasons for the estrangement beyond the staged photos, that family dynamics are complex and outsiders shouldn't judge. These points had merit. Perhaps there were private betrayals, broken confidences, or harmful actions that justified Meghan's decision to cut contact. But if such reasons existed, why not say so? Why allow the public narrative to position her as heartless and vindictive when she could offer context, even without specific details? The answer seemed clear to many observers. There was no additional context that would justify the complete abandonment of an elderly, ailing father who'd been nothing but devoted until he made a mistake under enormous pressure. The staged photos, embarrassing as they were, didn't warrant permanent exile. Thomas speaking to the media after being ghosted, while perhaps unwise, was understandable given that media was his only avenue to reach his daughter. If there were other, more serious issues, they remained unknown to the public and therefore couldn't factor into the court of public opinion's verdict. And that verdict, increasingly, was harsh. Polling conducted in December 2024 showed Meghan's favorability ratings in both the UK and US at historic lows, with the Thomas Markle situation frequently cited as a primary reason for negative opinions. People who might otherwise have sympathized with her complaints about the royal family, who might have supported her desire for privacy and autonomy, couldn't reconcile her words with her actions regarding her father. The cognitive dissonance was too great. Even in his absence from Meghan's life, Thomas Markle Sr. remained a powerful presence in the narrative surrounding her. Every interview she gave, every project she launched, every humanitarian cause she championed was viewed through the lens of her treatment of her father. The voice of critics, supporters, and neutral observers alike kept returning to the same questions. How can someone preach compassion while showing none to their own father? How can someone claim to value family while denying their children a grandfather? How can someone position themselves as a victim while making their elderly father the villain of their story? These questions weren't rhetorical exercises. They were fundamental challenges to Meghan's credibility, her authenticity, her right to lecture others about ethics and morality when her own actions suggested a profound lack of both. And unlike palace protocol disputes or tabloid coverage, which could be dismissed as insider royal issues most people didn't understand, the Thomas Markle situation was universal. Everyone understands parent-child relationships. Everyone understands mistakes, apologies, and forgiveness. Everyone can imagine themselves in Thomas's position, shut out by a child they sacrificed for, ghosted without explanation or opportunity for redemption. As Thomas Markle Sr. lay in that intensive care unit in early December 2024, fighting for each breath, surrounded by medical equipment and worried medical staff, but not by the daughter he'd devoted his life to supporting, the world watched and waited. Would Meghan finally reach out? Would she make that call, send that text, show some sliver of the humanity she claimed to possess? Would she rise above her pride, her image concerns, her years of maintained distance, to be present for her father in his potentially final days? Or would she maintain her wall of silence even as her father faced the ultimate silence, proving once and for all that her public persona was a carefully constructed fiction bearing no resemblance to the person she actually was? The story of Meghan Markle and Thomas Markle Sr. is still being written, its final chapter uncertain. But certain truths have already emerged, crystallized through years of public estrangement, and now thrown into sharp relief by a medical crisis that might end in death. A father's love, even when flawed and imperfect, deserves acknowledgement. Mistakes, when genuinely apologized for, deserve forgiveness. Family bonds, especially between parent and child, should be strong enough to withstand even serious breaches if both parties are willing to work toward healing. And perhaps most importantly, your true character is revealed not by what you say in carefully staged Netflix shows or Oprah interviews, but by how you treat the people who loved you before the world knew your name, who supported you when you had nothing to offer in return, who asked for nothing but connection and were given only silence. What will Meghan Markle's legacy ultimately be? Will it be the humanitarian she claims to be, the advocate for kindness and compassion? Or will it be the daughter who abandoned her father, who preached about family while destroying her own, who built a brand on authenticity while living a lie? Only time will tell. But if Thomas Markle Sr. passes away without reconciliation, without his daughter by his side, without even a phone call acknowledging his existence and her love, the answer seems tragically clear. History will not be kind to the Duchess who had everything but couldn't find it in her heart to forgive the man who gave her everything she needed to become that Duchess in the first place. The woman who spoke so eloquently about losing her father may discover that the real loss wasn't his mistakes but her inability to forgive them, not his absence from her life but her choice to make him absent, not what she lost but what she threw away. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Meghan will reach out to her father, or is it too late for reconciliation? What would you do in this situation? Like and subscribe for more in-depth looks at the real stories behind the royal headlines, the ones that reveal character in ways carefully curated public appearances never can.